straight. I'm able to still go through this process.
Brave woman, raising brave children. Proudly an immigrant mom. Bow to the immigrant mom. Brave woman, raising brave children. Proudly an immigrant mom. Bow to the immigrant mom. Brave woman.
Straight. I'm able to still go through this process.
Brave woman, raising brave children. Proudly an immigrant mom. Bow to the immigrant mom. Brave woman, raising brave children. Proudly an immigrant mom. Bow to the immigrant mom. Brave woman.
Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to the Immigrant Mom Show. I am super duper excited to have you all joining in. It's another Thursday. I am excited about what we have to talk about today. Come on in, come on in. If you join, you know the drill. Let me know where you're watching from and also go ahead and share so we have more people joining us. This is the Immigrant Mom. Thank you all for joining. All right. So you know how it goes. Welcome. I'm going to take a few minutes and invite more people to join us because we do have a very insightful, jaw-dropping story to listen and learn from today. If this is the first time that you're on here, my name is Ixtel Mbaacha Dobgima. I am the founder of the Immigrant Mom. The Immigrant Mom is an organization of mothers who are raising children in a country that they themselves did not grow up in. Super duper excited to have you. I believe we all have stories because we all have experiences. And this is a platform where we learn from each other's experience. Because I went through something, I am able to teach you the good out of that experience and also tell you about the pitfalls that I experienced. I don't want you necessarily to fall because I fell. So that's the entire mission of the Immigrant Mom, ensuring that we give our children the best through sharing our experiences, through coming together. All right, if you're joining, please, in the comment section, I'd like to acknowledge you. Let me know where you're watching from. Say hi, say hello, so I can know that you are here. And don't forget to share. Today, we're going to be talking about an illegal immigrant survivor story. That's a term that we are familiar with. A lot of us who are immigrant mothers, immigrant dads, immigrants in general are familiar with the word illegal immigrant. We're familiar with the word alien. It is our word. So we know what we're talking about and the struggle that comes with it. And so we're going to go into that story. I believe there's a lot that we're going to learn from her story. All right. If you're just joining, please go ahead and share in the chat box. Say hi. Let me know where you're watching from. I put together a couple of songs that we'll just listen to while we go ahead and share. It's a Cameroonian musician. Her name is Yolanda. I encourage you all to check her out. She is phenomenal. She is amazing. If you're new to Cameroonian music, well, I'm introducing something new to you today. I believe you're going to love it. All right. So let me play that and then go ahead and share with my network so more people can join.
He won't break my heart. He won't break my soul. Swear he loves me so. That's why I can't be. Même si m'a tapé, oh. Moi je vais rester, oh. Je ne peux pas effacer ce qu'on a traversé. Hey, hey. Me, I want to stay. Me, I want my home. Me, I want love. mama tell me say my liver I no get place for go. Who go provide for me? Moi j'ai resté. Même si ma tapé, moi je vais rester. C'est son pied mon pied. Me I want to stay. Me I want my home. Me I want love. Mama no fit tell you say I don't love her. Papa no fit tell you say I don't love her. Whoa, hey, c'est mon mari. Whoa, hey, c'est mon chéri. This is to all the women in abusive homes. For the sake of your life, please leave. Sinon, c'est l'amour qui nous tuera.
Well, guys, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that little piece. Again, it's a story. It's a song on domestic violence. If you don't understand what she's saying, pretty much it's a conversation of a woman who is being battered or is in an abusive situation and does not want to leave her home. And so the artist here is singing and telling women who are in that kind of situation that don't stay in an abusive relationship just because you want to stay married, because the consequence sometimes, most times, is death. And I know this is not domestic violence month. I'm not sure yet. Domestic violence month, is it May or September? I or maybe June, I don't know. But anyways, welcome guys. Hi Patricia, hi Nina. Thank you all for joining. Go ahead and share. Welcome. Without further ado, let's get started. This is the Immigrant Mom. It's a wonderful platform. Wherever we tell stories, there's beauty in our stories, because not just are we telling the stories, but we also are giving other people the opportunity to see through the lens of our experience. Not just to see through the lens of our experience, to learn from the lessons of our experience. And that's what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to listen to a story. And throughout that story, it's up to you to figure out where in that story do you see yourself? Where in that story can you pick out a lesson for yourself? Where in that story can you identify, plug in, and say, if this woman did it, then I surely can. Then I also can win. Then I also can survive. Then I also can thrive because somebody else went through it. Before I have her on, I prepared a little intro, which we're going to watch, and then she will come on live to tell us details that the intro missed. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a little snapshot of Martine's story.
Have you ever heard about a stateless woman? A woman no country wants to claim and accept as their own? A woman caught in between the cracks and crevices of a broken immigration system? A woman orphaned at a young age and learning to face Goliath like David had to? The story of Martine Kalaw is a jaw-dropping story. Martine was stateless, but now she is a stateless and illegal immigrant survivor. Martine fought long and hard to stay in a country she had known for decades as her home, even when that country called her an alien and was bent to send her packing away to a distant continent. Born to a Congolese mom in Zambia, Martine came to the US when she was only 4 and began a somewhat normal childhood with a mother who had later remarried a US citizen. Martine's mom filed a petition for her other children in Africa, but did not include Martine in her application to adjust immigration status, simply believing that just because Martine was in the US, her status was automatic. Unfortunately, Martine's mother passed away, and by the time Martine was 15, Martine had lost both parents. It wasn't until she was looking for a job at her university campus that she realized her statelessness. The reality of her statelessness came into full light. Martine was rejected by the only country she had called home. Martine faced the brutal immigration system. She faced the fear of the possibility of going back to Zambia or Congo. Martine tells the story of a broken immigration system, the pitfalls of her immigrant mom, the woes of secrecy that plagued the African family, and her recount of survival. Join us today on the Immigrant Show to unpack Martine's story. Brave woman, raising brave children. Proud me an immigrant, one pound to the immigrant.
Hi, Martine.
Hi, Estelle. Thank you so much for having me. Hi,
It
everyone.
is a pleasure. That intro is so heavy,
Hmm, yeah.
packed with emotion, packed with just a lot. But I know that I have not done justice to tell the story. But before we get into it, just tell the audience who you are.
Oh, thank you. You did a pretty phenomenal job, I will say. You spoke so beautifully with my story. My name is Martine Kalaw. I'm an African American woman, soon to be mother in 10 weeks from today. Um, I am a survivor of statelessness, undocumented, the undocumented immigrant journey. I'm a warrior. My name actually, Martine, means warrior, like. And I'm an author, speaker, and I do, outside of the work that I do to advocate for other individuals who are going through immigration challenges and woes. What I like to do is to help them restore their dignity, help them, support them in navigating and harnessing their power. Outside of that, I also run my own boutique agency on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I work with corporate entities to facilitate and introduce DEI in the workspace so that it can impact the people within the organization and create avenues, right, for more diversity in the organizations.
So I want to just put a point for this question so I don't forget it. And maybe you can remind me, or maybe someone in the audience can remind me, because we want to know how Martine found the courage to talk about something that most immigrants are
Yeah.
so shy or afraid or ashamed to talk about. One of the things that we know is it's a taboo to ask a person, what's your legal status? It's almost like the question we don't ask, but
Right.
it's become your story, your brand. And we will want to know. Someone please remind me to ask this question because we need to know.
Yeah.
Tell your story to the audience like you've never told it before. I know you've said the story a couple of times, and so it might be easier to go over a couple of points, but I don't want you to. I want you to go into depth and detail
Yeah.
about the story, and you can start from any point.
Yeah, absolutely. I will start from my journey to the US, and how I ended up here in America at 4 years old. I came with my mother, like you said. I was 4 years old. I was born in Lusaka, Zambia. My mother and my biological father are both Congolese. So ethnically, I'm Congolese. Okay. And my mother and father had been married for 10 years before I was born. And my father happened to be a polygamist. So my mother was his second or third wife. I'm not really sure at the time. Um, my mother, and it's so apropos that, in this song that Yolanda, her voice is absolutely beautiful. This is my first introduction to her. She's talking about domestic violence. My mother was a victim of domestic violence by the hands of my father. So, um, what I later learned is that we ended up in the US because my mother was escaping my father one day. And it's possible that there were neighbors and people who were involved in orchestrating my mother's escape. But one day, my father went to work, and my mom just took me, her only child that she had with my father, and we ran off. We went to Congo, where her siblings were, some of her family members and brothers and sisters, and her other children, because I was the seventh child. My mother's the youngest. I don't share the same father with any of my older siblings. I guess we were there temporarily until my mother's siblings, who were in the United States, were able to coordinate for her to come to the US. And at first, my Aunt Martine actually was going to just bring my mother over without me, because there's another cost to fly two people. But my mom insisted she couldn't leave her, then 4-year-old child, me, alone, and she wasn't going to leave her child, her youngest baby. So that's how I ended up coming to the United States. Her 4 or 5 of my mother's siblings were already here since the 70s, right? And we're talking 1985 at the point we came to the US. So they were pursuing the American dream. And my mom came to escape the violence of my father, the domestic abuse, and also to start a new life. And in hopes that she would be able to build a new life, establish a new life, and bring her other children over, right, who were in Congo. And so that's how I ended up here. And my mother remarried to my stepfather, who was my father. I mean, for as long as I knew, he was my dad, and he was the best father I could ever imagine. And the shoe dropped, and I actually had my fiance ask me, when did things change? Like, when did you lose the innocence of your childhood? Because for the first, for as long as I can remember my early childhood, it was like an immigrant community enclave in America. I had my aunts, my uncles were Congolese. Every weekend we were going to this aunt's house. There was always music, African food. It was just like wonderful. I went to school. Grew up with my cousins. They were like my brothers and sisters. I felt very insulated and safe, and life was great. We lived in Maryland, Silver Spring. There was a huge immigrant community here. So when the first shoe dropped was the day that it was my graduation from elementary school. My mother and my stepfather both were absent. My uncle had to come in their stead because my stepfather was ill and he was in the hospital. And I knew at that moment something was not right, because this is the man that raised me and instilled all these educational values in my life. He helped me like study for every test, and for him to not be there meant something was really
Seriously wrong.
bad, when you're 12 years old, you don't know all the intricacies and the details, but there's a feeling, that something's not right. And then shortly after graduation from elementary school, we moved to Ohio, my mother, my stepfather, and I, because he became really sick and we needed to relocate. And so, to make the long story short, it seemed like within a short period of time, I'm talking like maybe less than 6 months from the time that we relocated to Ohio, was when my stepfather died. And we moved there because that's where his family was. So we wanted to be closer to his family to help take care of him while he was sick. And then shortly thereafterwards, it feels like that first shoe dropped. And before I could even catch my breath, I remember the day my mom came home from a doctor's appointment. She told me that, I think I was like 12 and a half, maybe 13. No, maybe I was 13 or 14. She said the doctors say I have cancer. And I literally, from that moment, I remember from that moment to the day she died, I literally cried every day. Like, God, please. I knew, like, I felt like this is bad. This is bad. And you know, just really kind of prayed like every night, like, please don't take my mom. Don't take my mom. I need my mom. She's the only person I
And
had.
at this point, your dad had passed away.
No, my stepfather had passed
Your
away. I didn't
stepfather
even
had
know
passed
my
away.
father was alive.
Okay.
To my mother, he was dead. And
Right,
this is what she told me.
right.
She would say that, especially when she was angry, or she would say, you know, I mean, my mom, the abuse that my biological father inflicted on her, she carried it with her
Yeah,
and projected it towards me in her moments. Like, our relationship was very much of like a domestic violence situation. Like, when she had great moments, she was the best mom. She would buy me things. She was so happy. She would tell me how much she loved me. But then it would be like a switch would just, she would just flip a switch. And then she would say the most heinous things, right? And she would say, you know, I wish you were dead, you know, like your father, you know. So when you hear that, that's the association you
right.
make. My father, my biological father must be dead. And we had a very she was very authoritative, you know. And that's sometimes, I won't say that's the African tradition, I'll say that's a Congolese tradition. I won't even you know, project that onto Africans, because I don't know all African
Mhm.
cultures. But the culture that my mom, the historical culture that, where the generational trauma isn't broken, was one where you don't talk back to your mother, you don't ask questions, you don't understand why, like, you know, what happened to my father, how did he die if he's dead, you
Right,
know, none of that. You just accept what they say, you don't
right,
talk back, you don't ask questions. And that was our relationship.
right.
So
So from the time that she was diagnosed with cancer,
yeah.
your stepdad had already passed away.
Yes. Yes. So my
Okay.
stepfather was, you know, he raised me from the time I was like 4 or 5. You know, my mother met my stepfather shortly after she came to the US, got married, and he raised me, right? So I was his daughter. And he died when I was 13 years old. And so then from that time to, it was probably less than a year, my mother got cancer and became gravely ill. And I would later find out that my mom died with full blown AIDS and that my stepfather had HIV, but I didn't know that at the time. This, we're talking 1996, 19, you know, this is, and it was such a stigma, a taboo. It still is, you know. And there were just so many question marks in my life about, well, what happened? How did they have it? Why didn't they tell me? Why didn't my mom tell me? I was my mother's caretaker. You know, it was just her and I was taking care of her. Why didn't she think to, you know, make sure, like, I could have got contracted it if I was like dealing with her bodily fluids. Why didn't she tell me? There are all these questions on top of the fact that, oh no, I'm alone now. I don't have parents. I don't have my mom. I don't have my dad. Um, you know, my biological father was dead. Just my mother told me. So he was dead in my mind. So here I am by myself. I don't know what I'm going to do. And the worst thing that anyone can ever experience, at least a child, I really believe deep down, um, children have like this unnerving fear of losing their parents and especially their mother. Once that's done, it's like, boom, you know, everything, the shoes, both shoes have dropped. So that was my reality. And it was the question, the next question was, well, how am I going to survive? Like, who's going to take care of me? And my mother's family took me in, but I was tossed from one home to another. And there was, whether it was abuse in some homes or neglect. And then there were others who were just, what's the term, like bystanders. They saw what was happening and the things that were happening, but they didn't say anything. So I felt like I was literally alone. And that is what I later learned, is that during the short period after my mother died, there was a short window for me to adjust my own status, right? Because my mother and I came to the US as visitors, right? I
Right.
came on my mother's passport. At the time, back in 1985, children didn't have their own passports, right? So I was a picture on the back of my mother's passport with my name, and my name was not Martine Kalaw, Mwanj Kalaw at the time. It was Mwanj Kalaw, which, because my first name became my middle name, because as a gift, as a token of appreciation for bringing us to the US, my mother gave me my, made my aunts my namesake, right? So my aunt Martine, I got the name.
Right.
So it's almost like the person on the passport was not the person that was really here, There's no, there's just no real proof.
Yeah.
And so, and then my mom, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but hopefully this is making sense. So we came on
It is.
visas, and which people don't realize that most of individuals who end up, the majority of undocumented immigrants, and illegal immigration is not from driven by people who are crossing the border that we see on the news. It's really from
Right.
people who overstay their visas, right?
Right.
And so my mom overstayed her visa, but she married an American and then became a permanent resident. So through her own ignorance, I guess she thought, well, since I'm a permanent resident now and my visa situation has been adjusted, because my daughter is with me, automatically maybe hers is adjusted. I don't know. I will never know, right? Um, so when she got her permanent residency, her green card, she started applying for her US citizenship. And I remember very clearly because I was helping her study for her exam. Like I would quiz her. Um, and in her application, when you apply for US citizenship, I think there was an application where you can claim dependents or whatever, who else, your other children. She listed, and I remember I actually was with her when she was writing this out because my mom's English wasn't, great. So I was usually helping to translate things. She wrote all of her other children's names without and excluded mine. I didn't think anything of it at the time. And I don't think she did either, because our own ignorance was, well, I'm already here. I go to American school. I sound American, all these things. Let's work on bringing her other children who were in Congo, a country that has been devastated by war since 1990. Let's bring them here, right? That was her. That was her own ignorance.
Yeah.
So by the time she became ill, gravely ill, and passed away, she hadn't completed her citizenship application, and she hadn't completed her citizenship application, and I overstayed my visa, right? Because I didn't get permanent residency like she did,
Right.
through her husband, my stepfather. So it still didn't occur to me. There was nothing. I mean, when you're trying to survive and you literally lose both parents, you're being tossed from one home to another. The last thing, and then you're hit with this doozy of information that your mom had AIDS. Like, you're just trying to make sense of the world. Like, you feel like the rug was pulled from under you. Like, who am I?
Right.
you
And
know,
you were barely 14 at that time.
I was 14 and a half, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of trauma with all of this. I mean, watching your mother literally die, and and we're talking like she had cancer and full-blown AIDS at the time. So she was very, very ill, and I was with her. I was the person taking care of her. I was the person signing the bills and the checks and trying to, and also trying to go to school, because because I was trying, I wanted to, school and education is, has been um, part of the pillar of my success, and my mom and my stepfather really, enforced that and encouraged that. So just trying to be a normal kid at the same time, trying to be like parenting my mom, it's,
Yeah.
like taking care of the household. And then all this stuff happens. And then all of a sudden you're like, your whole life is thrown in boxes, and then you're shipped from one home in one city and
Right.
states, and then another like a few months later. It never occurred to me, oh, like what's going on with my immigration? Because again, my own ignorance was that I was fine. I'm US. It just was not at the forefront of my mind.
Right. Right.
And
Let me just press a
yeah,
pause there so that I can talk
yeah,
about this and not forget the lesson there. It's understandably when you come from a country that English is not the first language, there's so many things that can fall through the cracks and you wouldn't even know. And this
that's right.
is an example.
Yeah,
And the message and lesson that I hope that every one of us on here can glean, can take back to our communities to start to tell our friends, our aunties, our loved ones whom we know English is not their first language. You can tell that there's so many things they get, some they don't. Never to assume legal status.
that's right. And also there's that loyalty part, right? You and I kind of discussed this.
Yeah.
Sometimes within our communities, and I'll say this about Africans in general, that we have like a sense of loyalty. If there's a lawyer, an immigration lawyer who happens to also be African, or in this case, Congolese, and sometimes you can find the right person, and that's wonderful. But sometimes when we go and reach out to the people in our communities to help us, they find if they're not honest people, they can also take advantage of us, and we're tied to this loyalty. Well, they're also Congolese, so I trust everything they say. I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to get a second opinion. When we go to doctor and a doctor tells us something, we go and get a second opinion. We should always get a second opinion with an attorney as well. It's just, I think it's healthy practice. And I know you being an attorney, you probably would agree with that. Just go, and there's no offense to just go and
Right.
go like, talk to somebody else and see, hey, does this make sense? So I do think part of that played a role for my mom, like that, her loyalty and ignorance, and this commitment to the Congolese community. And maybe she had an attorney who was Congolese who was saying, oh, don't worry, or whatever. Who knows, right? These are all the question marks that I have. But I'm mentioning that because that was part of her personality and persona, very committed to her community. And I also have seen that um, with a lot of mentees who are in this space of being undocumented or journeying through that. There's this just blind trust and blind faith in everyone. And that's all well and good, and it's noble. But when you're trying to survive, you want to ask the questions.
Right.
And so that's another takeaway that I would share with the audience.
Right. And we have said this so many times on this platform that a person can give you well meaning advice from their experience, but it does not stop you from finding information
That's right.
for yourself.
That's right.
Like, there are a lot of us who came to this country and they said nursing was the only career possible. Not that there's anything wrong with nursing, but that was someone's experience. If
Yeah.
you went that route because someone said and you did not do your investigation and you're feeling unfulfilled in a career today, that right there is the lesson. As
Yeah.
immigrant mothers, let's seek information. Information will come if you ask the question. So, from the time that your mom died, you did not even realize, it was not obvious to you that there was anything wrong with your immigration
Absolutely not.
because
Absolutely.
life went on as normal.
It didn't go on as normal. It went on as far as I just was trying to survive. Like, my reality was, how do I make sure that I have a place to sleep? How do I make sure that this home that I'm in, this person doesn't hurt me and I don't upset them so that they want to hurt me or kick me out? Like, this was my reality. And how do I also just continue to focus on school in spite of all this chaos around me, because my mom's dying words to me was, stay in school, it's going to save you. And by the way, she was very apprehensive about me being with her family, because she sort of sensed, she did not think they would treat me right. She said that she was very afraid, and she knew. And so anyhow, I, by the grace of God, honestly, I mean, some of my friends have said, Martine, you're the luckiest unlucky person we've ever met. Like, because I was in a situation with my aunt where she decided to take me out of school so I could work in her consignment store. I mean, now I'm like 16 years old, and she's like, I'm going to take you out of school so you can work in my store by myself. So I'm managing this cash register in a neighborhood that was where there was a murder that took place literally across the street. So I'm by myself. And literally at that point, there was hopelessness for me. So I will never take on the credit and say that it was my strength and perseverance that got me through. I think it was, sometimes I had this vision of, I was always a daydreamer my whole life. I always used to just daydream about the life I wanted since I was a kid. And little did I know that I was sort of creating that life, even though it wasn't there yet.
Right.
And so that always gave me hope. Whenever I felt like life was so hard, I would escape into my head and just imagine this life that I wish I could have. So I think that helped resuscitate me in those times. I also believe, that my ancestors and the prayers of our ancestors, I really do believe, like, is what lifted me and buoyed me up in those moments where I tried to give up, because I had a lot of suicidal ideation. I attempted that many times because I just felt like life is just, if this is what my life is, I can't take this anymore. It's like too much,
Right.
it's too much. And so at that point, I just sort of gave up. All right, well, this is my life. My aunt is, she took me out of school. I'm in this horrible situation. My mother died. My father died. My stepfather, my father died. I'm alone, and I feel like, you know, I was always told by my stepfather, if you work hard enough, you'll make it. But here, this was the opposite of that. I was working so hard, and life was just not giving me a break. And little did I know, right? This woman, this beautiful Jamaican woman, all I remember is she had freckles and sort of red short hair, walked into my aunt's consignment store one day when I was working by myself, and she walks around and stuff, and she says, "Oh, how old are you? You're so young working in the store." And I was sort of dismissive. I also was scared of getting in trouble and saying too much. So I didn't want to say much. And, I think I made up a lie. Oh, I'm not, I'm on school vacation today or something. And then she asked me what school I went to. I mentioned the school that I was supposed to be going to in the local Silver Spring community. And then she said, she asked me a question about boarding school. Have I ever considered that? And I'm like, who does this woman think she is? Why is she asking me questions? She's going to get me in trouble. And my aunt is going to think that I'm telling her things and I'm going to get in big trouble. And so I just like dismissed her. And I was like, no, no, I'm good. Thank you. And she left, didn't see her again until I think maybe 2 weeks later. I mean, I don't remember the time span, but it was on a weekend when my aunt was in the store with me. And this woman comes in again, and now she's chatting it up with my aunt. Like they're like best friends. And I'm thinking, yeah, see, this woman doesn't, if she can't see through this, my aunt, and how evil my aunt is. And literally, I don't mince words when I say this. My aunt was an evil person. And in my eyes, she was the biggest monster I've ever experienced. And, if she can't see through her, then yeah, I was right about this woman. Right. And then like they're talking for hours in the back room, and like I can see them like they're really connecting. And then they come up to the front, and walking like they're best friends, and she says something along this, woman, the Jamaican woman, says something along the lines of, your aunt and I were just talking, we were talking about boarding schools, and we want to, she mentioned that your cousin, her son is, she wants to get him into boarding school, and then I suggested that maybe we should just try to get both of you into the schools, and I'm affiliated with this program that helps Black children get into prep schools, so I'm going to just connect everybody. And I was like, okay, whatever, and little did I know, I will never know, because it's like she entered my life and then left. But I feel that maybe she orchestrated it in that way, manipulated the situation, because she knew that it was me that needed to go to the boarding school. Forget my cousin. He
Right.
didn't have grades. So she connected me to this group of Black women that helped um, kids get into private Episcopalian, historical Episcopal prep schools. And from that point on, life, I was ushered into different communities and enclaves back, right? I felt like I was back in those safe spaces. And it was in high school in Charlottesville, Virginia, where, when I was applying for college, where the question of my status started to come up. And, what is your status? And I was like, I don't know. And my Aunt Martine at the time, she was feeling, kind of getting jealous that I was going this route and, trusting these strangers in the school more than her. And she would threaten to, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to make sure that you don't have a way, you get deported and you don't have your papers. Like, she would allude to things like this, but I didn't really understand what she meant. Like, what does this
Right.
mean? Why is she saying this? Like, I don't understand. And it wasn't until I got into college in upstate New York, Hamilton College, when I was trying to adjust my work status on my social security card so that I could work in the dean of faculty's office. That
And that is because your work card had cannot work without DHS
non-working.
authorization.
Yeah, it just is non-working on a social security card. Because now that I'm a U.S. citizen, it says it doesn't say non-working. But when when we entered, my mother and I entered the U.S., I guess at some point we got social security cards, and they said it states on your social security card with the number non-working. The same social security card I had since the moment I entered the U.S. or shortly thereafter, is the same social security number, excuse me, it's the same one. But at that time on the card, it said non-working, right? Because I wasn't a resident.
Right.
And so I got a private scholarship to go to college, just like I got a private scholarship. A family decided to sponsor me to go to prep school. A judge, by the way, a retired judge now, and his wife, they paid my way through private school. And so I then got a private donation, private funding to go to college, right? Because I wasn't eligible for any kind of federal grant, federal money. And so, I just needed additional money to just take care of myself, like just the small, like day-to-day stuff, right?
Right.
And so I wanted to work in the dean of faculty's office, and provided all the information. And the information at the time, and let me just clarify and say that, when I applied to school, the question of my status it was a question mark, right? That's when it was like, well, we don't know what your status is. I didn't know what my status is. The college didn't know. This is, late 1999. What's your status? We don't know. But no one, including myself, thought it was undocumented, illegal, right? We just thought, oh, something, you know, I just need to do something to adjust it or something to that effect. So that's how, so we knew I didn't qualify for a federal loan, but I got private funding. And so what we were looking to do was then, adjust my status And meanwhile, let me get a job so I can make some extra money, extra cash, and I'll work at the dean of faculty's office. And so my card said non-working. So me and a college administrator, through our own ignorance, said, well, let's just go to the Social Security Administration and let's like request to change this so you can work. It seemed like a very normal thing to do. And literally in that moment, I remember that day like it was yesterday. The, Social Security Administrator, you know, took my information in. Then she started typing it in. It was taking a lot longer than I would have imagined, and it's because they were probably pulling up reports from then INS and, you know, putting in information, and collecting my data. I'm at this college, and so therefore I'm undocumented, and the euphemism of being undocumented didn't even exist. I was an illegal alien. That's it, right? And even though we've got these euphemisms now, we still know that at the end of the day, euphemisms are just that. They're terminologies that we use to soften things, but it doesn't make a difference in how people perceive us, right?
Right.
So that is how I entered this state of being an illegal alien. And I shortly thereafter, I found out that I was also stateless because I was placed in deportation proceedings.
So let's
Like,
talk about the stateless, because some people don't like. It's almost like, how are you stateless? Like you were
yeah,
born in Zambia,
yes,
originally from Congo.
yes.
So how come you were stateless?
Yeah, and hopefully, if people don't know what statelessness is, I'm part of an organization called United Stateless, and I encourage everyone to just Google it, unitedstateless.org. It's an amazing organization. And the simplest way to define statelessness is a person who doesn't have a country. Oh, maybe it is .com. Sorry. I have it, unitedstateless.com. Thank you. A person who doesn't have a country. And there are different ways that a person can end up not having a country. If they are displaced, right? We know climate change is forcing people out of their countries, their homes. If there's a war and the country no longer exists, like if you were born in the former Yugoslavia, now the former Yugoslavia doesn't exist. So if you don't have another country that you can establish your nationality with, well, then you are stateless. There are a lot of countries that don't allow birthright citizenship, a lot of them in the Middle East as well. So you might be born in the country, and maybe your mother is born in that country, but still it's through patrilineal citizenship, right? So you have to prove that your father is Saudi to be a Saudi citizen. So you were born in Saudi Arabia, maybe your father, your mother's Saudi, was born there, but still it's not through your father. And so I'm just throwing out some
Right.
examples. Another one is, we saw these devastating images of Haitian migrants a few months ago. I think it was last year, of them being, trying to come over the border, and, CBP is on horses with what looked like whips, attacking them. And very few people, what they didn't understand is the backstory that you have a significant number of Haitian migrants who are actually stateless. So meaning that they were born in the Dominican Republic. Okay, so they're actually Dominican. They're Haitian, maybe ethnically, but nationally, they technically are Dominican. Maybe their parents were born in Dominican Republic, their grandparents. But now the Dominican Republic came up with this new law, right? To this racist, blatantly racist law that says anyone predating back, if you have Haitian ethnicity predating and born in the Dominican Republic, predating back to 1942, you're no longer considered a citizen of Dominican Republic. I mean, that's crazy. So now you got these individuals whose parents and their parents' were born in Dominican Republic, and they don't have a home. They don't have a country, right? So that's how people can become stateless in a myriad of ways. For me, to keep it simple, I was born in Zambia, but because I didn't grow up in Zambia, I was supposed to claim citizenship of Zambia at a certain age, by the age of 18, based in the constitution. I didn't know that. So I was disqualified as a citizen of Zambia. Congo was actually Zaire until 19, I can't remember what year. So when it became Zaire, when it went from Zaire to Congo, the constitution changed. So it was like essentially a new country that I hadn't, and I didn't establish my citizenship there either. So I was not qualified as a Congolese citizen. And then lastly, the US didn't acknowledge me. So you got my birth country, my biological mother and father's birth country that say you don't belong here. And then the country that I've known as home since I was 4 years old also doesn't claim me as citizenship as a citizen. So that is how I became stateless. And so the implications of being stateless is that when you're undocumented and you're stateless, there's no country for you to go back to. So you're more likely to end up in a detention facility indefinitely. There's very little, if any, legal recourse that you have because you don't have any country.
Right.
You can't argue anything based on any constitution to protect you because there's no country.
Right.
So individuals who are stateless are at a higher risk for human trafficking, for just being in these detention facilities indefinitely, for dealing with human rights atrocities. So this was the reality that I was facing.
Right. And I know a lot of people are curious about how you got out of it.
Yeah.
It's established you're stateless, an orphan, having
Yes.
gone through the unimaginable.
Yeah.
What was the fight like and how did you get out of it?
It was awful. It was I called it my nightmare because it was like a 7-year nightmare. Imagine, you're fighting to, and I know maybe some of our audience can actually imagine it because they're going through it. And my heart goes out to each and anybody. I would never wish any of it on my worst enemy, because you're living this double life of you're trying to survive, because reality is you also have to like put food on the table. You have to feed yourself. You also have to be contributing to the society and economy so you can prove to this court system that you deserve to be here. So you got to find a way to do that, which is a catch-22. But at the same time, everything, all the structures that you need to uplift you are pushing you down. So like the things that would always occur to me is, I don't have an ID. How does the judge expect that I'm going to get from where I am to Buffalo, New York, which was 5 hours away? I don't have an ID. I can't fly there. They were doing immigration raids on buses. How do they think I'm going to go through? And when I would go to the courthouse, they would ask for my ID. And I thought, well, if this is not the stupidest thing, I mean, does that make any sense? I'm here because I don't have ID, and you're asking for my ID so I can get into the same very building where I'm trying to fight for my life. This doesn't make any sense, right? So these are the kind of things that happened. I also had an immigration judge who was on a mission to annihilate me, and I am not mixing my words. He was removed. He was asked to leave the Miami courts because of his reputation and how he treated other illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants in Miami, who happened to be mostly Haitian, Black people. So he had a bias. I won't even say bias. He was racist, right? Mm-hmm. So what he does and how immigration courts do is, no, they didn't disbar him, or, they just asked him to relocate, and he went somewhere else to terrorize other people, right? And I also had really bad luck with immigration attorneys. And I think that is, unfortunately, it's more common than uncommon. I went through 6 immigration attorneys. Partly I was a student. I didn't have money. So I had to rely on pro bono attorneys. And what I didn't know is that when you got pro bono attorneys, when you have attorneys are in this space, are riddled with cases. They're exhausted. This takes such an emotional toll on anyone. So imagine you have 30 cases and everybody's like, save me, right? On top of that, it feels thankless because you're not getting paid. You're doing this pro bono. That's a lot. And it's only
Right.
now that I put myself in that perspective. But at the time, all I could think about was, oh my gosh, my lawyer forgot to change my address in the application. And therefore the judge would get mad at me, not my lawyer, me. My attorney would introduce evidence in the 11th hour, right? Around my, if someone asked about colorism, I think that there are so many layers, and I appreciate you asking, because as a person who studies diversity, equity, inclusion, like there's so many intricacies to immigration. Definitely, I believe colorism, I think racism, I think there are a lot of phobia, xenophobia. And there are instances where I do think being the person I am gave me more privilege than some other people, right? I knew a Muslim Senegalese guy who was going through what I was going through the very same time, and he's still going through this now, right? And I do believe, because when you put the two of us together, who's less threatening in white America eyes, right?
Right.
So I do recognize the privilege I possess, and I also recognize the bias that people in the immigration courts and immigration system has for people who look like me too. So
Right.
it's both. So anyway, this was my reality, trying to survive, having an immigration judge who said in the courtroom to me, you deserve to be deported. Because the worst thing that that happened was my attorney introduced, one of the attorneys that I had, the one I had the longest, introduced the case that we were arguing, um, introduced new evidence in the 11th hour, right? So for the longest time, we were using the case we were arguing was against my aunt, the statute that said, hey, if you had a guardian who was abusive to you as an undocumented while you were who was abusive to you, you can adjust your status based on that, right? So I was under this Victims Against Women VAWA
Wow.
Act, right? And so we were focusing on my aunt. And even though my attorney knew about my mother, right, and he knew about my mom beating me and her verbal abuse, but he also knew that it was such a sacred thing for me. I was not going to ever share that in any courtroom. At least that's what I told him in the very beginning, right? But in the 11th hour, he said, this is what we have to do. And I said, absolutely not. No, I haven't even come to terms with any of this. I cannot do this. Not to my mother, not to her memory. I can't do this. And he said, we have to. This is what's going to win our case. Well, it backfired, because the judge said, where's this coming from? You made this up. He didn't say it to the lawyer, my lawyer. He said it to me. You're a despicable human being for you to make up something so horrible about your mother to save yourself. You deserve to be deported. And literally, Estelle, that nearly killed me. Like literally, I felt like someone had taken a knife and just stabbed me in the front. Like, sorry to be graphic. I felt betrayed in every possible way.
Because it was the thing you did not want to do. You felt like you needed to protect the family secret. Your
Yes,
mom indeed was abusive towards you in
yes,
ways.
yes,
You did
yes.
not want to talk about it in court,
I
especially.
wasn't ready to. I
Right.
didn't understand. I needed to unpack it. I was still mourning her death. And so I felt betrayed. I also felt like I betrayed my own mother. And so I felt like the worst human being. So I'm carrying all of that along with trying to be a normal student in my college so I can get into graduate school, and trying to figure out how I'm going to get to court, because the judge, we would go to master calendar hearings. It would be like 5 minutes in, he'd say, come back in 2 months, right? Because your address changed, you didn't change your address, something so trivial. So come back in 2 months, so flippantly. And I'm like, how am I going to come back in 2 months? I got to find someone to drive me here. I need to find this was just, and so I had a lot of anxiety. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I was seeing a forensic psychologist because every time leading up to a hearing, I was so terrified of the judge, almost as much as I was terrified of my aunt. Um, and I just would get extreme anxiety and, developed, I had an eating disorder. It just got worse. And just because I felt like I had no control over my life, nothing I did was working. And so just felt like I was in this horrible nightmare. And I got out of it because I have, and on my website, illegalamongus.com, I create this maze because I think that having an illustration is the best way to help people understand how arbitrary, how random this broken immigration system is. You can't, we were to clone me and say, okay, this is another person who's gone through exactly the same thing that Martine's gone through. If you follow Martine's process, you will have the same outcome. We can't do that, right? There's no prescription for any of this. It's so random. It's based on bias. It's based on a lot of things, right? It's based on the luck of who you get, the luck of the draw. Do you get the right IJ immigration judge, the wrong one? All of these things. So I wanted to illustrate how random it is. So the randomness of my situation was after 7 years, that's when I went public with my case because I finally found an attorney who said, we've exhausted every possibility. There's nothing else. And this judge, he just he's out to get you. He's not going to stop. He's relentless. We need to, and if you're going to end up in some detention facility, we need to embarrass America. Like, they need to know that someone like you who went to US schools, who got the best grades, who worked hard, who was a victim of circumstances, like your parents died. What else do they want from you? We need to shame America. And that's what she said. So she said, you got to go public. And that's it. So I went public, and I also started writing my book, not because I thought I was going to come out of this. I thought I was going to end up in a detention facility, and then I was not going to make it out like alive because I knew myself. I knew what I could tolerate. I knew how that was my greatest fear. And I just knew I wasn't going to make it out. And so for me, it was more of like, let me just tell my story because if this is going to help somebody else, then that's what this was all meant to be. Just so people knew that I existed. And I don't want to just be another blip in another alien number. Because I really thought that when I'm gone from this earth, all I will be is just another number. And I'm more than that. I am more than that. I'm somebody's child. I was somebody's friend. I was a good person, and so I decided to go public, and I was terrified. The first time I shared my story happened to be when the late Senator John McCain had a rally on immigration, and he was, regardless of his political affiliation, he was known to be one of the most bipartisan, senators on this issue. So I went and I spoke on stage to a couple hundred people, and he thanked me for my courage. And then I just started doing it more and more. And that's where I found my voice.
And which answers the question that I asked the audience to remind me about, why you had the courage to start to talk about your story. Now, where did the sun start shining? When did things turn around for the better for you?
It started, I think, when I started speaking up. When I started speaking out, because that's where I started to restore my dignity, right? Because I felt and I was told that I was a nobody. I mean, literally everything, when you think about your identity, you're defined by your family, you're defined by your status, and you're defined by your country. I didn't have any of those things.
Right.
So I really did feel like I was worthless. And I just I was like the scum of the earth. I really carried that. And so I was afraid to speak. I was afraid to say anything. I didn't think anyone would care. And when I did speak, I felt like relief. I felt like I conquered this fear. And then I started doing it more and more. And my attorney, the last attorney who I had, she did not treat me like a case. She said, "No, you're smart. I want you to understand what's going on with your own case." I started reading my files. She started showing me all the documents, the things that my mom had signed when she was applying for citizenship. She was educating me as if I was her apprentice. And so I became empowered. And then I was in grad school and I started taking immigration law courses, refugee and asylum law. I was taking all these law courses. I was like, you know what? I need to understand my own situation. I'm going to just educate myself as much as possible. And nowadays, I mean, everything's at our fingertips. So this was, we're talking 2000, 2003, whatever. It was a little bit harder. But that's when I started to feel like, wait a minute, Martine, you have some power. You feel powerless. You feel like this judge owns your life. You feel like you have nothing. You feel like you have to beg and for everything you have, but you have your voice and you're really smart. So teach yourself, educate yourself. And you have this now attorney who's treating you like you're her apprentice on your case. So I took myself out of the situation as if it was me, and I looked at it objectively as if it was a case, like in one of the law courses I was taking. And I felt more empowered. Not everyone, I'm not suggesting that everyone do that, like, scrutinize their case and because not everyone wants to do that. But the point I'm making is at least have a little bit of knowledge about it. Don't just trust your attorney to be your savior. And that's what I'd been doing before. And that's what changed as well. And
Right.
then I had a therapist who got it, right? She was not like every other therapist. In the past, I would go into a therapy session. Therapist would be like, "Tell me more about immigration. What does that mean? Being illegal?" The judge. This person had worked with other immigrants. She knew the experience of immigration judges. So she would validate me. She would say, "I can't even imagine. I know I've been in those immigration courtrooms. They're horrible." And I could breathe a sigh of relief because I didn't have to justify who I was and my fears anymore. So I felt like I had my posse, my team, and I had this one friend who said, "You want to get, anytime you want to meet with your meeting with your lawyer, anytime you're going into those courtrooms, I'll go with you so you don't have to go alone." And I felt like, oh my gosh, like to this day, this woman, like, she just doesn't understand the magnitude of that. She didn't have to be a lawyer. She didn't have to be a paralegal. She was just a friend who was like, "I'm here next to you so you don't have to like process this on your own." Like when you go to you go to the doctor because you're afraid of bad news, you take somebody with you. That's what it felt like.
Right.
I started to feel powerful, and that's when things changed. And then my case was sent to the Board of Immigration Appeals twice, the highest immigration court. The first time they sent it back to the judge. The second time they did the unthinkable. And that was the point where I was like, I don't know. I'm just, this is,
And at this point, was this based on the Violence Against Women's Act?
I was always a VAWA. So it's,
VAWA.
that's why it's kind of hard to find my case. Even if you go online, you can see snippets of it. You can most likely see when I spoke on Capitol Hill, you'll be able to find that from 2006. But because I was a VAWA, Victims Against Women's Act, under that, I was protected, right? So all of my case isn't just public knowledge or available to the public, right?
Yeah. And for those who don't know what VAWA is, let me just, insert this information out there. If you're married to a U.S. citizen or married to a lawful permanent resident or the child of, and you're subjected to cruelty, physical, verbal abuse, there is an application that you can file to USCIS. There is a relief available for you to be able to get your permanent resident if you can prove through testimony, through different evidence that you were subjected to abuse. A lot of women don't know that. They
Yeah.
stay in marriages where they're abused. Even if you have a conditional green card, say you're married to someone and it's just a conditional green card you have, but you're subjected to abuse, you cannot leave. You feel like if you leave, that's the end of your life in America. There is relief.
Yeah.
So you should consult with an attorney. I just thought I could share that
Thank
part.
you for sharing that because you said it much better than I would be able to from your legal expertise. Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, so it was all under VAWA and the Board of Immigration Appeals. I remember this day like it was yesterday. I was just exhausted, right? It was like years and years of this. And I'm like, yes, I do feel a lot stronger. I feel like I have a voice, but I'm tired. I'm tired. I was just like, I'm tired. I mean, now I had a work authorization, work permit that seemed to expire like every 90 days, which really meant that every 60 days I would have to reapply and stand in that line. And I had to coordinate, okay, because I was in New York City at this point. So if I get up at 5 a.m., and I can stand in the line, it'll be shorter. So by the time they open the offices at 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m., I'll be at the front of the line so I can get there and hopefully they'll approve it so that I can get it stamped. This was like my routine, and this is what many people go through. And I just was so exhausted, and I was exhausted, but I just accepted that this is maybe my life. And I remember one morning I got up like, okay, here we go again, another day just like this. And my lawyer called me. I was brushing my teeth and she said, Martine, are you sitting down? And I was like, no. She said, I think you need to sit down. And I was like, okay. And she said, Martine, it's over. And I'm like, what? She said, it's over. And I'm like, what do you mean it's over? She said, Martine, the Board of Immigration Appeals say it's over. They just remanded the case back to the immigration judge and they told them to grant you permanent resident status. I mean, she said it in much more legal terminology. I'm just breaking it down for like layman's terms. And Martine, they provided a 6-page document letter explaining why you deserve this. It's over. Martine, she said, I don't even believe in God, but this is like a miracle because I've never seen this before. And I was just too shocked to cry. I was just like, I don't even know what it was like. She was speaking another language. I was like, I don't even know what she's saying because this was my reality. And it was just something I accepted. And I just thought this is just the condition of my life.
In all of this, where was your aunt, Martine? In all of this, where was your extended family?
My aunt passed away in 2004. She slowly exited from my life while I was in high school because the prep school, um, without me saying much, they realized that I was in an abusive home, and I don't know what she said to them. I remember I got a B+ in Spanish class, and I told my Spanish teacher, I need to take another exam. I need to give me extra credit, whatever. I need to get an A. And she's like, Martine, it's okay. And I was like, no, it's not okay. I need to get an A. Please, what can I do? What can I do? And she was like, it's okay. I'll explain it. I was like, my aunt's going to be really mad. And she's like, no, I'll talk to your aunt. And I was like, no, you don't understand. And she was like, no, I'm going to talk to your aunt. Everything's going to be fine. All I know is after that conversation she had with my aunt, whatever, she came back and she said, I talked to your aunt. I cannot let you go back home. And I'm getting the school involved and we're not sending you back home. We just can't do that. And then the next thing I knew, the school said, we are not going to let you go back. We're going to find you host parents for the weekend so you have a place to stay. I was in boarding school. So during the week, everybody just orchestrated around me. They were like, we're not letting you go back home. I don't know to this day. I don't know what she could have said. I can imagine what she could have said. And so that was it. And then I remember she, a few weeks later, she threatened me and said, she called me over the phone and said, you think those people are going to take care of you? You just watch. And then I had my other aunts calling me saying, what are you doing? Why are you breaking up the family? Why are you being so difficult? And I'm like, are you kidding me? This woman's like abusing me and you're getting mad at me because so that's what I meant by some people being complicit and just
Mhm.
allowing things to happen. So,
And that's a whole narrative on its own about, the family dynamic, especially with the African culture
yeah,
and protecting,
yes,
protecting the family secret to the child's detriment. But
yes.
because we are over time and your story is so
Oh,
rich,
just over time. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry.
it's so rich. There's so much that we can unpack out of your story, your experience, your resilience, the fact that you are here with us sharing this story. I
Yeah.
mean, God, I am a believer in God. I believe that, there had to have been purpose to
Yes.
keep you, to go through all of this. What advice do you have for an immigrant mom?
Yes.
You're a child of an immigrant mom, about to be an immigrant mom
That's
yourself.
right. That's
You know,
right.
don't sugarcoat it for us. What
Yeah.
advice do you have based on everything that you've endured and gone through?
Wow. That's really, I mean, I have so many things that I could say, but I would say that one is don't let anyone take your dignity and your power. We all have power. We may not feel like we do. We might feel like we're trapped in a situation. We might feel, but we all have some sense of power. My mom had her power the day my dad went to work and she decided she was going to get out of the situation, or maybe she could have died. So that's where she harnessed her power, and it came, and sometimes we we need someone else to help us harness that power. Okay, so it's not, we don't have to feel like we have to find that power within us. Let's have someone help us access that power, right? Have somebody help you find that place of power wherever it is, however small it is. You got it. Your voice is your power. Your strength, the little action you take is your power. Reaching out to an organization if you're a victim of something, of abuse, because you don't know how to get out of it yourself, that is your power. Any little thing you have, it can be your power. And don't forget that, please, please. For me, my sense of power was reignited when I realized that, wait a minute, I still have a voice. I can tell my story. No one else can tell my story. I can tell my story. And that was my sense of power. So that's one piece of advice I will offer, is to find that power, find it within you, or have someone, the closest person to you that you trust, help you find it and ignite it, right? And then also, when you find that power, it will restore that dignity that you may have lost. And it's okay if you feel weak. It's okay if you feel broken. It's okay if you feel downtrodden. It's human, and it doesn't have to be last forever. So that's my initial, um just, when I think about my advice, it's that, right? And then all the other things are much more technical and operational, like find people who you can access and create a team, right? Like, make sure you have someone that you can, who goes with you to, court if you're going through immigration, all that stuff. That all comes later. It's more operational, but really it's accessing your power and acknowledging that you do have it. You do have it. It's deep,
Right.
deep buried within you, but you do have it, you know? And
And
it's
not everyone.
okay to feel, I think that the other thing I want to say is that you don't have to be strong all the time.
Mhm.
Okay. This whole thing of like black women are so strong, we're black girl magic, we always have to be strong. This is actually to our detriment
Right.
sometimes. Okay. When you feel weak and you can acknowledge that to someone who feels safe, that is part of your strength, is acknowledging that.
Right. Absolutely. And not every immigrant mother or immigrant individual or person will be going through the immigration court system
Right.
or deportation, but also we face challenges with finding our power in the workplace.
That's right.
It's so important. Like we have jobs, in the how out on social media, we look really strong. We look like we have our power, but then
Yeah.
at work, the inability to use your voice to speak up. against the number of, issues, bias, prejudice that we face, especially African
Microaggressions. Yeah.
immigrants, a lot. What does your organization provide in terms of individual resources or things that the immigrant community can plug into what you're already doing and that they can find some kind of help and resource?
Yeah, so I personally don't have like a direct organization. Do you mean like my DEI
No, like
organization?
just everything, like in a
Yeah,
nutshell. What can we get or gain out of
yeah.
the work that you're doing?
I think, what I like to do and the things that I like to provide are access to resources. When you hear about something, when I hear about something, I know there are resources in different parts of the country, whether it's immigration attorneys, whether it's attorneys for something else, whether it's an organization that supports immigrant women that are from a particular part of the world, like African immigrant women. These are the resources that I think are important for us to keep sharing and passing on. And this is what I do. I also think that the idea of a mentor, having a mentorship
Yes.
is so important, because that can be that person like you talk about when you're in that workplace space, or even outside of workplace, you're dealing with immigration issues. Having a mentor, having someone who has gone through this, who can understand, there's an unspoken understanding, and who can listen, is
Yes.
really, really beneficial. Some people have coaches, mentors, however you want to define it, but having some sort of resource. So that's something that I act as for people, but there's only one of me, right? But the organization that I'm now a part of, United Stateless, and there are other great organizations. There's Undocu Black. I mean, these are more immigrant organizations. They provide these types of resources, right?
Right.
Having that safe space and that safe person who you can reach out to. And then there are other organizations that I'm affiliated with that provide support, mentorship, sponsors outside of just immigration, right? Anything else that we're looking, that we as women, immigrant women, are looking to navigate, right?
Right.
And so that's where I think it's important to make those connections, ask, find those resources. And one of the places, you go on my website, I do offer that. It's very specific to being undocumented and being stateless, but that's a starting point.
Right. And also, we didn't have time to talk about you finding out that your birth father is
Yeah.
actually alive.
Yes,
And I
that's
saw some pictures where you met up with your half brothers. And did you cover
yes.
that in your book?
It's all in my book, but I'll keep it quick and say that social media does have some, I mean, we can say there are a lot of mixed feelings about social media in this day and age. But what I can say is that my biological father, who I thought was dead for until I was 30 years old, was I 30 or 33? I can't remember. Um, Found me through LinkedIn. Okay, so
Oh, wow.
that's LinkedIn has many meanings in my life, and so it's been the most amazing experience to reconnect and to have my biological father give me a piece of my history, and not just about me and him, but my mother. He gave me access to seeing my mother in a specific way, and a light, seeing her as a woman, not just as my mother. And this is where the healing began. This is where I was able to have true compassion and forgiveness for her. And this is how and why I can talk about the I can write about my mom and talk about the abuse, but also say that she was the most amazing person at the same time, right? Because she was a very complex human being who didn't have mental health support, didn't know about that, didn't have the resources, and did the best that she could. I'm not justifying how she treated me, but I do. She was a great human being, maybe not the best mother, right? And I have the utmost compassion for this woman, and I will love her to my last breath on this earth.
Martine, this story has been so powerful, so rich. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah. Thank
I
you.
can go on and on because there's just so much that we haven't even gone, through. But I like to
The
encourage
audience
people.
is like,
To
"You go."
where can they find your book? For those
Yes,
who are
if you go
curious.
to illegalamongus.com, you can find the link to my book. It's on Amazon, but that's probably the easiest place to go. You can go on Amazon and look up illegal among us as well.
And so that's
But
the title, Illegal Among Us. Okay.
yes, it's called Illegal Among Us: A Stateless Woman's Quest for Citizenship. But if you just type in that, that's pretty good.
Wow. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I am so grateful that
Thank
you
you.
continue to be a light to the immigrant community, not just the immigrant community, the country, the world at large, by sharing your story, by overcoming the hurdles that you overcame, preparing to be the mom that you will be, the great mom. Thank you so much. And guys, this, is the end of the show, the end of this session. We're going to have subsequent sessions. If you have a story, this is how you find your voice, by sharing your story with other people. You know how we do it. If you're in the comments, let Martine know, what is it that you have taken out of her story? What is it that you love the most? You can extend your gratitude for everything. And so they start coming in. Marian says, thanks for sharing your story. It's been enriching.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you for sharing your story. Very powerful. God bless you. That's from
Thank you.
Minerva.
I received that. Thank you.
Flora says, so brave. Thank you for encouraging us with your story. And more comments coming through. But thank you again. Thank you, thank you,
It's
thank
been
you.
an honor. It really has been an honor, and thank you for creating this space where we can share and exchange ideas and keep inspiring each other.
Thank you. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. Go ahead and share our page, like our page, just so that you can keep abreast with every time that we have a show. If you have a story, the links are going to be on our page on how you can reach out to us so we can schedule you for an interview, because we believe that your voice is valuable and this is a safe space to share. You can learn and practice your voice on here. Until next time, you stay blessed and see you couple Thursdays. Straight on